Rayhan hated museums, but their partner Laius had done unmentionable things to the ship's star drive the last time two of them had fled the authorities, and the repairs had drained their savings. Which was why Rayhan was on a station too close to more civilized regions of the Dustway, flirting with a tall, pale woman decked in jewels, while they feigned interest in the pre-Delevolutionist art. In spite of themselves, Rian was impressed by the colonists who had carved pictures into the soles of worn-out space boots, so useless that it had to be art. Not that they planned to say that to the woman. "They are wonderful evocations of the Festival of the Vines, using that repeated motif there," the woman was saying. She brushed a long curl of hair out of her face and toyed with one, dangling in her earring. "I was just thinking that myself," Rayanne lied. "A Festival of the Vines with its accompanying cheerful inebriation and sex would be less agonizing than having to pretend to care about the aesthetics of this place. Too bad Rayhan, Laius, planned to disappear in the next couple of hours. The woman was pretty enough despite her obsession with secret scapes, and Rayhan was of the opinion that if you wanted to look at a circuit, nothing beat the real thing." And a tinny voice said in Rayhan's ear, "Are you at location yet?" Rayhan faked a cough. "I've been in position for the last half hour. You sure you didn't screw up the prep? Just hurry." At last, the alarms changed. The jeweled woman jumped, her astonishing blue eyes going wide. Rayhan put a steadying arm, and in the process relieved her of a jade ring, slipped it in her pocket. Not high-value stuff, but no one with a sense of worth of items ever wears things that are removable. They weren't wearing gloves on this outing, had avoided wearing gloves since their exile, but the persistent awareness of their naked hand never faded. At least small consolation, the added sensation made legerdemain easier, even if that meant to endure distastefulness of skin touching skin. A loud, staticky voice came over the public address system. "All persons, please proceed to the nearest exit. There is no need for alarm. But due to an incident, the museum needs to close for maintenance." The woman was saying, with charming anxiety, "Oh, we'd better do as they say. I wonder what it is." Come on, Rayhan thought. What's the delay? Had they messed up setting up the explosives? They had turned to smile and pat the woman's hand reassuringly when the first explosives went off at the end of the hall. Fire flowered and flashed. A boom reverberated through the halls with an additional hiss of sparks when a security screen went down. Rayhan's ears rang, even though they'd been prepared for the noise. Two stands toppled, spilling a ransom's worth of iridescent black quantum pearl strands inscribed with algorithmic peons. The sudden chemical react of the smoke made Rayhan cough, even though you'd think they'd be used to it by now. Several startled bystanders shrieked and bolted through the exit. The woman leapt back and behind, a decorative pillar with commendable reflexes. "Over here!" she called to Rayhan, as if she could rescue them. But Rayhan feigned befuddlement, although they could easily lip-read what she was saying. They could barely hear past the ringing in the ears, and sidestepped out of her reach just in case. A second blast went off farther down the hall. A thud suggested that something out of sight had fallen down. Rayhan thought snidely that some of the statues they had seen earlier would be improved by a few creative cracks anyway. The sprinklers finally kicked in, and a torrent of rain rained down from above, drenching them. Rayhan left the woman to fend for herself. "Where are you going?" she shouted to Rayhan. "I have to save the paintings," Rayhan said over her shoulder. To Rayhan's dismay, the woman pivoted on her heel and followed. Rayhan turned to lip read her words, almost crashing into a corner in the process. "You shame me. Your dedication to the arts is greater than mine." They just rounded the corner to the relevant gallery in its delicious gear collages when Rayhan was alerted, too late, by the quickened rhythm of the woman's footsteps. They inhaled too sharply, coughed at the smoke, and staggered when she caught them in the chokehold. What? Rehan woke in a chair, bound. They kept their eyes closed and tested the cords, hoping not to draw attention. The air had a familiar undertone of incense, which was very bad news. Perhaps they were only imagining it. Rehan last smelled this particular blend with its odd metallic top notes, its ancestral shrines of childhood home they hadn't returned to in 8 years. They stilled their hand from twitching. Otherwise, the temperature was warmer when they'd accustomed to. Laius liked to keep the ship cool, and a faint hissing suggested an air circulation system not kept in a good shape as it could be. Even more faintly, they heard the distinctive, just out of tune humming of the ship's drive. Too bad they lacked Laius' ability to identify the model by listening to the harmonics. More importantly, how many people were here with them? They didn't hear anything, but that didn't mean... You might as well open your eyes, Kelran. A cool female voice said in a language they had not heard in a long time, confirming Rehan's earlier suspicion. They had not fooled her. And Rehan wondered whether their link to Laius was still working, and if she was alright. Laius? Are you there? She heard her static, and she knew she was alright. And so they did open their eyes, might as well assess the situation, since their captor knew they were awake. I don't have a right to that name any longer. They hadn't been part of the Kel people for years, but their hands itched with the memory of the Kel gloves that hadn't worn in 8 years. The Kel reckoned it. And indeed, with their hands exposed like this, they felt shamed, vulnerable in front of one of their people. The woman before them was solidly built, dark like the silhouette of a tree, more somber in mind than their highly ornamented agent who had brought Ryan in. She wore the black and red of the Kel judiciary, a cursory slip of veil obscured part of her face, its translucence doing little to hide her sharp features. And the veil should have scarred Ryan more, as it indicated that the woman was a judge errant, but her black Kel gloves hurt worse. Ryan had been shipped from them, burned 8 years ago when the Kel cast them out. I've honored the terms of my exile, Ryan said. What have you done with my partner? The judge errant ignored the question. Nevertheless, the sudden tension around her eyes indicated that she knew something. Ryan hadn't been watching. I'm Judge Kel Shiora, and I have been sent because the Kel have need of you. Of course. Ryan, fighting to hide their bitterness. 8 years of silence and adapting to an un-Kel world, and the moment the Kel had need of them, they were supposed to comply. Shiora regarded them without malice or opprobrium, or anything much resembling feeling for that matter. There are many uses for a Janjahar. Janjahar, what non-Keld called in their various languages a haptic chameleon. Someone who was not only so good at imitating patterns of movement they could scam inattentive people, but also fool the machines whose security systems depended on identifying their owner's characteristic movements. How you interacted with your gunnery system, or wandered about your apartment, or smiled at your lover you'd known for the last decade, it wasn't magic. A Janjahar needed some minimum data to work from, but the knack often seemed the way. The Kel produced few Janjahar, and the special forces snapped up those who emerged from the Kel academics. Rayan had been the most promising Janjahar in the last few generations before disgracing themselves. The only reason they hadn't been executed was that the Kel government had foreseen that they would someday be of use again. Tell me what you want me to do, then. If I undo your bonds, will you hear me out? I won't try anything. Ordinarily, Rayan would have felt sorry for anyone who trusted a thief's words, except they knew the kind of training a judge had. Shiora wasn't the only one in danger. They kept silent as she unlocked her restraints. I had to be sure. Talk to me. What's the plan? General Kavarian has gone rogue. We need someone to infiltrate her ship and retrieve a weapon she has stolen. I'm sorry, Rian said after a blank pause. You just said General Kavarian has gone rogue? Kavarian, the hero of Split Suns? Kavarian of the Five Splendors? Shiora gave them an amused look. Kel Command sent her on a contract to guard a weapon research facility. Kavarian recently attacked the facility, made off with the research and the prototype, and the prototype may be armed. Surely you have a number of loyal Kel who would be happy to go on you with this assignment. You're the nearest Janjahar in this region of the Dustways. Most people reserve the term Dustways for particularly lawless segments of the Spaceways, but the Kel used the term for anywhere that didn't fall under Kel's spheres of influence. Also, few of our Janjahar match your skill. You owe the Kel for your training, if nothing else. And besides, it's not your interest to live in a world where former Kel are hunted for theft or immensely powerful weapon prototypes. They named it the Incendiary Heart. It initiates an inflationary expanse, like the one at the universe birth, capable of killing galaxies, multiple at once. And remote detonation. There's a timer. It's up to you to get out of range before it goes off. The radius of effect? 30,000 light years, give or take, in a directed cone. That's the only thing that makes it possible to use without blowing up the person setting it off. Rian closed her eyes. They would fry a non-trivial percentage of that galaxy. And you don't know if it's armed. No. The General is running very fast. To what we don't know. But she has been attempting to hire a mercenary Janjahar. We suspect she's looking for a way to control the device, which may buy us time. I see. Can you offer me any insight into her goals? If you knew that, we would know why she turned coat. Blowing up a region of space, even a very local region of space in galactic terms, would do no one any good. In particular, it would make a continued career in art theft a little difficult. On the other hand, Rayhan was determined to wring some payment out of this, if only so Laius wouldn't lecture them about her lack of mercenary instinct. The ship wasn't going to fix itself after all. I'll do it. I'll do it. But I'm going to need resources. And the judge was surprised. You've lived too long in the Dustways. I can offer payment and the only coin that should matter to you. Or you do think we haven't been watching you? Rayhan should have objected, but they froze up, knowing what was to come. Do this for us. Show us the quality of your service, and Kel Command will reinstate you. And if you do not, to prison you go. Very precisely, she peeled the edge of one glove back to expose the dark, fine skin of her wrist, signaling her sincerity. Rayhan stared. Laius? They asked again. No response, which meant Laius probably hadn't heard anything. At least she wasn't here to see Rian's rejection. As good as they normally were at controlling their body language, they had been able to hide the moment of hunger for a home that they had thought forever lost to them. I will do this, but not for some bribe, because a lepton like the one you describe is too dangerous for anyone, let alone a rogue, to control. And because she needed to find out what had become of Layus, to protect her. But Shiora wouldn't understand any of that. The women who escorted Rian to the ship docked on the Kel carrier. Rian elected not to ask how this had happened, at a familiar face. I don't know why you're not doing this job, Rian said to the pale woman, now garbed in a Kel uniform, complete with gloves rather than jewels and outlandish stationer garb she'd affected in the museum. The woman smiled at Rian. I will be accompanying you, she said in the lingua franca. Of course, Shiora had extracted Rian's word, but neither would she fail to take precaution. They couldn't blame her. Kel design sensibilities had not changed much since Rayhan was a cadet. The walls of dark metal were livened with tapestries of wire and faceted beads, polished from battlefield shrapnel, obsolete armor, lens components and laser cannon, spent shells. Rayhan kept from touching the small superstitiously as they walked by. What do you call that? She said finally. The woman seemed inclined to speak first. I'm Sergeant Kellans. She stopped before a hatch and she tapped a panel in full sight of Rayhan, his mouth curling sardonically. I'm not going to be stupid enough to try to escape a ship full of Kel. Yeah, I bet you have great aim. Besides, there was Layus' safety to consider. You weren't bad at it yourself. She would have studied their record. That Rayhan hated how exposed the simple statement made them feel. I can initiate the stance of master marksman, but it doesn't give me the eye or the reflex. In these past years, I found safer ways to survive. Anaz's eyebrows lifted at safer, but she kept her contempt to herself after chewing over Anaz's passkey. The hatch opened. A whoosh of cool air floated over Rayhan's face. They stepped through the air, and Anaz could say anything, their eyes drawn immediately to the lone non-Kel ship in the hangar. To their relief, the flare cat didn't look any more disreputable than before. And Rayhan advanced upon the flare cat and entered it, all the while aware of Anaz at their back. Layus was bound to one of the passenger seats, the side of her swollen face swollen and purple. Her cap and curly hair sticking out in all directions, and Layus' eyes widened when she saw two of them. She didn't struggle against her bonds. Ryan swore and went to her side. Is she damaged? Ryan said in a shaking voice. She's G-Kel. She wasn't even concussed. She'll heal. She's my partner. We work together, if you insist. And Anaz said with a distinct air of distaste. The pressure eased, and she cut Layus free herself. Layus grimaced. New friend? She said. New job, anyway. They should have known that Shiora and her people would treat G-Kel with little respect. We're never going to land another decent art theft. You have no sense of culture. This one's more important, Layus. Rayhan reinforced their words with a hand signal. Emergency, new priority. What if the Kel got on you anyhow? Rayhan had done their best to steer Layus away from any dealings with the Kel because of potential awkwardness. It hadn't been hard. The Kel had a reputation for providing reliable but humorless mercenaries and a distinct lack of appreciation for what Layus called the exigencies of survival in the Dustway. More relatively, while they controlled a fair deal of wealth, they ruthlessly pursued and destroyed those who attempted to relieve them of it. Rayhan had never been tempted to take revenge by stealing from them. Anaz's head came up. You never said you had a partner. Never told you what? We'll be traveling with Sergeant Kelanaz, Rayan said, hoping to direct Laius. No luck. Her mouth compressed. Safe to talk? She signed at them. Not really, but Rayan didn't see that they had many options. You see, I'm a former Kel. I was exiled because of a training incident. Laius laughed incredulously. You? We've encountered Kel mercenaries before. You don't talk like one, move like one, we'll accept. She faltered as it occurred to her that of the various guises Rihan had put on their heists, that one hadn't been a guise at all. And Nas spoke over Laius. Sooner we set out, the better. We have word of Kavarian's vector. We don't know how long our information will be good. You'll have to use your ship since the Judge errands will draw attention, even if it's faster. Don't, Rayan sighed to Laius, although she knew better than to slip the Flare Cat's modifications to the stranger. I'll fill you in on this way. The Dustway held many perils for ships. Wandering maws, a phenomenon noted for years and unexplained for just as long. Particles traveling at unimaginable speeds, capable of destroying any ship lax in maintaining its shielding. Vortices that flittered light, even in dreams, causing hallucinations. And when Rayan had been newly exiled, they had convinced Laius of their usefulness because they knew the Dustway paths new to her. Even if they hadn't been useful for making profit, they had helped in escaping the latest people she'd swindled. Ships could be tracked by the eddies they left in the Dustways. The difficulty was not in finding the traces, but interpreting them. Great houses had risen to prominence through the monopoly over the computational networks that processed and sold this information. Kel Command had paid dearly for such information in its desperation to track down General Kavarian. Assuming that information was accurate, Kavarian had ensconced herself in the Fortress of Wheels, neutral territory, where people carried out bargains for amounts that could have made Rian and Laius comfortable for the rest of their lives. The journey itself passed in a haze of tension. Laius snapped at Anaz, who bore her jibes with grim patience, and Rian withdrew, now wanting to make matters worse, which was the wrong thing to do, and they knew it. In particular, Laius had not forgiven them for the secret they had kept from her for so long. And at last, Rian slumped into the co-pilot's seat and spoke to Laius. You must have a lot of questions. I knew about the Chameleon part. I hadn't realized that the Kel had their own. Usually they don't. But the Kel rarely let go of the ones they produce. It's the only reason they didn't execute me. Or kill you. What did you do? The Kel says there are three kinds of people after a fashion. The Kel, the G-Kel, or the non-Kel. Whom they have dealings with sometimes, and those who aren't people at all, just disposable. Anyway, there was a training exercise. People who are not people were used as mannequins, props in the exercise, to be gunned down or saved or discarded, whatever the trainees decided. I chose the lives of mannequins over the lives of Kel. For this, I was stripped of my position and cast out. I've always known the universe to be unkind, and I assumed that hired killers would have to learn their art somewhere. A sick yearning started to pit in Rian's stomach. They still hadn't told her about Kel Shiora's offer. Time enough later, if time came to that. The Fortress of Wheels currently hosted several fleets. Tension ran high. Although its customary neutrality had so far prevailed. Who knew how long it would last? Laius, interested as always in gossip, They reported that various biters of the incendiary heart had shown up, and certain warlords wouldn't hesitate to take it by force if necessary. Security on Kavarian's command ship was tight, but not been designed to stop a Janjahar. Not surprising, the Kel relied on their employers for such measures when they designed to stop places like the Fortress. At the moment, Rand was disguised as a bland-faced lieutenant. Rand had finessed her way past the 5th lock in a row, losing themselves in the old bitter pleasure of a job well done. They had always enjoyed this part best, fitting their emotions to that of someone who didn't realize what was going on so perfectly. Machine recognition systems could not tell the difference. But it occurred to them that everything was going too perfectly. Maybe I'm imagining things, they told themselves without conviction, and hurried on. A corporal passed them by. He didn't give them a bit of mind, just a cursory salute. Ram was cold, hastened away from him as soon as they could. They made it to the doors to the general's quarters. Laius had hacked into the communications system and was monitoring activity. She assured Rian that the general was station-side, negotiating with someone, since neither of them knew how long that would be. Sweat trickled down Rian's back, causing the uniform to cling unpleasantly to her skin. They had some of the general's haptic information as well. Anaz hadn't liked handling it over, but as Rand had pointed out, the mission would be impossible without it. Kavarian of the Five Splendors, one of the most celebrated Kara generals, and a musician besides. Her passcode was based on an extraordinarily difficult passage from a keyboard concerto. Another keyboardist could have played the passage, albeit with difficulty reproducing the nuances of expression. While not precisely a musician, Rand was trained in a variety of the arts, for occasions such as this. And Laius often remarked it with shame they had no patience for painting, or they could have a respectable career forging art. They got through the passcode, holding their breath, and the door began opening. A fist slammed them in the back of the head. Rand staggered and whirled, barely remaining upright. If I get a concussion, I'm going to charge Kel Command for medical care. But her thoughts started slow. Finally, someone took the bait, breathed Rand's assailant. Kel Kavarian. Rand recognized the voice from the news reports they'd watched a lifetime ago. I was starting to think I was going to have to hang out signs, hire a bounty hunter. She did something fast and complicated with her hands. Rand found themselves shoved down against the floor and the muzzle of a gun digging in the back of her neck. Sir, save it. Come inside. I'll show you what you're after. Don't fight me. I'm better at it than you are. Rand couldn't argue that. The general let Rand up. The door was closed again, but she executed the passphrase in a blur that made Rand think she was wasted on the military. Surely there was an orchestra out there that could have used her star keyboard skills. Rand made sure to make no threatening moves as they entered, scanning the surroundings. Kavarian had a taste for the grandiose. Triumph plaques of metal and stone, lacquerware covered the walls, forming a mosaic of battles and past comrades lost. The light reflecting from their angled surface gave an effect like being trapped in a kaleidoscope of sterilized glory. And Kavarian smiled cuttingly. Rian watched her retreating step by step, gun still trained on them. You don't approve, Kavarian remarked. Rian unmasked, so there wasn't any point in still pretending to be one of her soldiers. I'm a thief. It's all one to me. You're lying. Never mind. better make this quick. You're the Janjahar we threw out, aren't you? It figures Kel Command would drag you out of the dustways instead of hiring some G-Kel. I'm G-Kel now, General. It's a matter of degrees. It doesn't take much to figure out what Kel Command could offer an exile, does it? Hold that. I'll get the incendiary heart for us to look at. How do you know I won't just shoot you? Well, because right now I'm your best friend. And you're my best friend. And if you shoot me, you'll never find out why I'm doing this. And a good chunk of the galaxy is doomed. Frustrated by the sincerity that read in the set of her shoulders, Rian trained the gun at Kavarian's back and admired her sangfold. She showed no sign of being worried. Kavarian spoke as she pressed her hand against the plaques. They probably told you I blew up the research station after I stole the incendiary heart, which is true. Did they also mention that someone armed the thing before I was able to retrieve it? They weren't absolutely clear on that point. Well, I suppose even a Judge Errant, I assume they sent a Judge Errant, can get informed out of the dead. Anyway, it's a time bomb, presumably to give its user time to escape the area of effect. Rian's heart sank. There could only be one reason why Kavarian needed a Janjahar of her own. You're going to blow. Unless you can do-arm it. One of the few researchers with a sense of self-preservation was making an attempt to do so before he got killed by a piece of shrapnel. I have some video, as much of it as I could scrape before the whole place blew. I don't know if it's enough. Kavarian removed the box, shimmering, disturbing shade of red, gold, bronze. The original mission was no good, that much was clear. Alright. Kavarian played back a video of the researcher's final moments. It looked like it had been recorded by someone, involved in a firefight from the shakiness of the images. Part of the key code were obscured by smoke, by flashing lights, by flying shrapnel. Rian made several attempts, then shook her head. There's just not enough information, even for me, to reconstruct the sequence. How do you know he was really trying to disarm it? Rian said. He was the reason I knew exactly how destructive the incendiary heart was to begin with. The scientists shouldn't be allowed near weapon designs, Rian thought. How long do we have? She told them and blanched. Why did you make off with it in the first place? They couldn't help but think that if she'd kept her contract, this whole mess could have been avoided in the first place. Because the contract holder was trying to sell the incendiary heart to the highest bidder. And at the time I made off with it, the highest bidder looked like he was going to be one of the parties in an extremely messy war. Not only did I suspect that they'd use it at the first opportunity, I had good reason to believe that they had terrible security, and I doubted anyone stealing it would have any scruples either. Unfortunately, when I swiped the wretched thing, some genius decided it would be better off if it's set off, deny it to everyone. Never mind the casualties. Kavarian closed her fist over the incendiary heart. It looked like her fist was drenched in a gore of light. Help me get it out of here. What makes you so confident that I'm your ally? Kel Command sent me after you. It's true. But I can't offer a better reward than if you bring the accursed thing to them. On the other hand, even if you think I'm lying about the countdown, do you really trust Kel Command with the dangerous weapons? They'd never let me hand it over to them for safekeeping anyway. Not when I broke my contract by taking it the first place. No, you're right. That's not a solution either. Kavarian opened her hand and nodded companionably to Rayon, as though they'd been comrades for years. I need you to run away with this and get farther from the center of civilization. I can't do this with a whole Kel fleet. My every moment is being watched, and I'm afraid someone will get us in a fight, stall us in a bad place. But you, G-Kel thief, used to darting in and out of dustways, your chance will be better than mine. Rian's breath caught. You're already outnumbered. Sooner or later they'll catch up to you. The Kel, if not everyone else who wants the weapon they think you have. You don't even have a running start since you're docked here. They'll incinerate you. Yes. We are Kel. We are the people of fire and ash. It comes with the territory. Are you willing to do this? Her equanimity disturbed Rand. Clearly Layu's way of looking at the world had rubbed off on them more than they'd accounted for these past 8 years. You're gambling a lot of my reliability. Am I? You were the one, the most promising Kel cadet that year. You gave it up, because you were concerned about the lives of mannequins who didn't even know your name. I'd say I'm making a good choice. You are my agent. Take the gloves, take the incendiary heart with you. A great many lives depend on it. They knew what the gesture meant. You hold my honor. Shaken, they stared at her, stripped of Chameleon games. Shiora was unlikely to forgive Ray for betraying her to an ally with Kavarian. But Kavarian's logic could not be denied. Take them. And for the love of fire and ash, don't tell me where you're going. I don't want to know. Rayan took the gloves and placed the ones that had been wearing with them. I'm committed now, she thought. And they brought their first up to the chest in a Kale salute. The general returned it. Things went wrong almost from the moment Rayan returned to the ship. They refused an escort from Kavarian on the grounds that it would arouse Naz's suspicion, and the general had assured them that no one would interfere with them on the way out. But the sudden blaring of alarms and the scrambling of crew to get their assigned stations meant that Rayan had to do a certain amount of dodging. At a guess, the fortress-imposed ceasefire was no longer in effect. What had triggered hostilities, Rayan didn't know, didn't particularly care. All that mattered was escaping with the incendiary heart. The flare cat remained shielded from discovery by the stealth device that Layu so loved, even if it had been a distressing tendency to blow up. The engines exactly, and they escaped the sharp-eyed predators. A Naz ambushed Rayan, for they had reached the flare cat. In the dim hole where they had suiting up to traverse the perilous webbing, they had contacted the flare cat to Kavarian's command ship. Rayan had seen this coming. Another Chameleon might have fought back and died of it, and Shiora had no doubt selected a Naz for her deadliness. But Rayan triggered the mask into Kavarian's own visage, and smiled Kavarian's own smile at a Naz, counting on the reflexive Kel deference to rank. And the gesture provoked enough of a hesitation that Rayan could still pull out their own sidearm, put a bullet in the side of her neck. They've been aiming at for heads, no such luck. Still, they'd take what they could. The bullet didn't stop in that, and Rayan hadn't expected it to, but the next two did. The only reason they didn't keep firing was that Rayan could swear that the incendiary heart pulsed hotter with each shot. No further attack came, but a Naz might live, might even survive what Kavarian had in mind for her. Layus wasn't dead. Presumably, Naz had known better than to interfere too permanently with the ship's master. But Layus wasn't in good condition either. Anaz had left her unconscious and expertly tied up. A lump on the side of her head revealing where Anaz had knocked her out. Blood streaked her face. So much for no concussion, Rand thought. A careful inspection revealed 2 broken ribs, although no finger or arms. Small things to be grateful for. Laius had piloted with worse injuries, but it wasn't something either of them wanted to make a habit of. Rand shook with barely quelled rage as they unbound Laius, using the lockpicks that the 2 of them kept stashed on board. Here with just the 2 of them, there was no need to conceal their reaction. Rand took the precaution of injection, the first painkiller, and they added a stim, when they preferred to avoid. Nevertheless, the 2 of them would have to work together to escape. It couldn't be helped. "Oh, my head," Laius said in a half-groan. "Did you get the Kelthug what you wanted? Are we free yet?" "Not yet. As far as I can tell, Kavarian's gearing up for a firefight, and they're bent on blowing each other up over this bauble. Even worse, we have a new mission." And they outlined the situation while checking Laius over again to make sure there wasn't any more internal damage. Luckily, Anaz hadn't confiscated their medical kits, so Rand retrieved one and cleaned up the head wound, then applied a bandage to Laius's torso. "Every time I think it can't get worse," Laius said while Ryan worked, but her heart wasn't in it. "Let's strap ourselves in. Get flying." "What? You don't want to appraise this thing?" "I don't," she said dryly. She was already preoccupied with the ship's pre-flight checks, although her grimaces revealed that the painkillers were not as effective as they should have been. "I'll be glad when it's gone. You better tell me where we're going." The sensor array sputtered with the spark lights of many ships, disported by the fact that they were stealth. "Ask the General to patch us into her friend or foe identification system," Rand said, and then realized there were more Kel ships than there should have been. Kel Command must have been fleet waiting to challenge Kavarian in case Shiora failed her mission. "And ask her not to shoot us down on our way out." Laius contacted the command ship in the fortress to impose lingua. The connection hissed open. The voice that came back to them over the line sounded harried and spoke an accented lingua. Rand distinctly heard Kavarian snapping something profane in Kel language. The voice spoke back, referring to Laius with a particular suffix that meant coward, as if it applied to a G-Kel ship to begin with. Still, Rand was glad they didn't have to translate the detail for Laius, although they summarized the exchange for her. "Thank you," Laius said in a voice that suggested she was thinking about blowing something up, her own way out. "Don't. I wasn't going to. They need this ship to fight with, so let us get away from any pursuit. As far as I'm concerned, they're all the enemy." They couldn't blame her, considering what she'd been through. The scans he'd reported on the battle. Rand, who had webbed themselves into the co-pilot seat, tracked the action with concern. The hostile Kel hadn't bothered to transmit their general's banner, a sign of utter contempt for those they fought. Even if G-Kel received banners, although they weren't expected to appreciate the nuances of Kel heraldry. And the fighter launched from the hangar below them. Our turn. And the flare cat rocketed away from the command ship, veered abruptly away from the fighter flight corridor, and Laius rechecked stealth, and the engines made the familiar dreadful coughing noise in response to the increased power draw. But it held, for now, and a missile streaked through their path, missing them by a margin that Rand wished was larger. To their irritation, Laius was whistling as she maneuvered the flare cap through all the grape shot and missiles and gyrating fighters and toward the edge of the battlefield. Laius had never had a healthy sense of fear. He almost always made it with the engines coughed again louder. Rian swore in several languages. No. I'll see to it. You route the pilot functions to your seat, and I'll see if I can coax it along a little longer. Rian wasn't as good a pilot, but Laius was indispensably better at engineering. They gave way without an argument, and Laius used the ship's handholds to make her way toward the engine room. Whatever Laius was doing, it didn't work. The engine hiccoughed. The stealth went down. A flight of Kel fighters at the periphery noted the Flare Cat's attempt to escape and dismayingly found it suspicious enough to decide to pursue them. Rian wished their training had inclusion fake being able to be an ace pilot, or actually being an ace pilot. And the incendiary heart continued to glow malevolently. Rian shook their head. It's not personal, they told themselves. Laius, forget stealth. If they decide to come after us, that's fine. It looks like we're not the only small-timers getting out of the line of fire. Can you configure our boosters? She understood them. Part of the Flare Cat's ability was its quick flight, and they made use of it this time, gliding past bombs and missiles. For the next interval, Rian lost themselves in the controls and readouts and hot immediate need for survival. They stirred when Laius returned. I need the heart. I've rigged the launch capsule for it. It won't have any shielding, but it'll fly as fast and as far as I can send it. It's loaded. It's ready to go. Do you think we're far enough away? Yes. Well, away we go. And the capsule launched. Rian passed over the controls to Laius so she could get them away before the capsule's contents blew. And the fighters, given a choice between the capsule and the Flare Cat, split up. Better than nothing. Laius was juggling in the power draw of the shields and the star drive, life support, probably other things that Rian was happier not knowing about. The Flare Cat accelerated as hard in the opposite direction as it could without overstressing people in it. And the fighters took this as a trap and soared away. Rian expected they could come around for another try when they realized it wasn't. Then between the space of one blink and the next, the capsule simply vanished. The fighters overtook what they had been in position. That could all have been stealth if Rian had known better. But they thought to check the sensor readings again. Well, all right. We're alive. Rian wondered what would become of Kaveri. That was no longer any of their concerns. Yeah, we're alive, but we're still broke. You didn't want to wrangle any payment out of those stupid Kel before we left? Especially after they tried finishing Kaverian? They'll come to toast us next, you know. Rian pulled off of Kaverian's gloves and set them aside. Nothing worth anything to either side of us. Once they would have given everything to win their way back into the trust of the Kel. Over the past years, however, they had discovered that other things mattered more to them. We'll find something else. Anyway, it's not the first time we've been hunted. We'll just have to stay one step ahead of them, the way we always have. Laius smiled at Rian, and they knew they'd made it out all right.